Seneca's very first chapter in Letters from a Stoic is titled On the Use of Time. Time is something that is very paradoxical in the sense that we never feel like we have enough, yet our lives are longer than anything else we will do. Put another way, our days are often long, while our years are short. Another curious thing about time is that we all have the same amount every day, 24 hours, yet we all use it in different ways. Some of us use it for productivity, others for pleasure, and yet others, again, are oblivious. Oblivious. They just let time slip by, slip through their fingers, and then they reach the end of their lives with a lot of wasted time. So how can we go about not wasting time? It may or may not be obvious, but let's first set the stage by going into why we should be considerate of our time in the first place. The first one is obvious, very obvious. We only have so much of it. Time is a finite thing. We know that we only have 24 hours in one day. However, we don't know how many days we have in life, but we can say that it is finite. So even though we can't put a definite number, I can't tell you how long you're going to live. We do know that someday you will die. Let's make some assumptions. We can assume that, let's say you're going to live to the average lifespan expectancy, which is 77 years old in the US. Maybe our genes are better. Maybe we take care of ourselves better. And that's something that you'll have to think about if you want to add in a decade or two to that average. But let's think about this. 77 years is 924 months. It's just over 4,000 weeks. It's 28,000 days. Almost 673,000 hours. 40 million minutes. And 2.4 billion seconds. Those are numbers. Those are finite numbers. No, they're not exact. I don't know if maybe you'll live to be 1,000 months old or 3,000 weeks old. I don't know. But I do know that there's a number remaining to your life. We know it's finite. We know that it'll run out. Time will run out. Imagine how quick a week goes by. It's like a blink of an eye. You get excited for payday. And you think, oh man, it's going to be a while till next payday. Nope, payday's here again. We are at the end of March 2024 as I'm recording this. This will come out early April. It seems like we just had Christmas. That's 3 months of this year gone. And you only have 924 months total. Not left, but total. Life is so damn short. It's tragic. That's why we have to make the best of what we have while we are here. Manage your time. Consider what you are doing with your days, weeks, months, and years, because whether you like to admit it or not, your time on earth is finite. So what's wasted time? Can we put even a definition to that? We'll look at this practically here shortly, but let's get abstract for a minute. Wasted time in the Stoic sense is spent not living according to nature. That's very abstract. Perhaps we could define it more clearly. Let's try. Wasted time is time spent not acting appropriately. Not doing your duty, not being kind, considerate, wise, contemplative. It's time spent engaging in vice. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. Stoics are not perfect by definition. Even sages, depending how you look at it, you could say they're perfect in the sense that they are the most perfect that anyone could ever be. So maybe we could call them perfect, but even sages are not really perfect in the way that we think about it. We think about perfection as a complete lack of suffering. It's not what the Stoics say a sage is. They're a bit too practical in that sense. But let's go through some examples of what wasted time looks like. Worrying about something that is not up to you, like the weather, for example. Showing up late to work. The time wasted is time presumably sleeping in, not fulfilling your duty. Arguing defensively about something that you know is wrong, but that your ego is telling you to get defensive about. How much time do we waste arguing about things just because our ego is hurt? And the funny thing about that is the more you argue, the less time you have. So your ego is telling you that you're this grand thing that cannot be damaged and you cannot be wrong. You do everything right. But your ego isn't in check because you don't understand that you are finite. And the tragic thing about that is that as you are arguing, because of your ego is taking away time. So it's almost like the universe is punishing you for having an ego. Here's some other examples of wasted time. Grieving past its due. Now, grief is a natural emotion, but life does have to go on eventually. Some grief is appropriate. Grieving for 3 decades, it might not be appropriate. What about 2 hours a day on social media? What about sleeping in every day? What about holding a grudge? People hold grudges for their whole lives. That's not to say your whole life is a waste if you're holding a grudge, but it does mean that every time in your head you bring up that grudge and you're feeling those bad emotions towards someone, that's wasted time. You don't need to be feeling those things. Now, this list has the potential to be massive. I'm going to stop there. I hope, though, that all of those things I listed, you would agree with that there's a waste of time there. Wasted time is when we act inappropriately in relation to our place in the world. We can use my analogy of a guitar. You are a guitar string aiming to play in harmony with the other strings. Acting appropriately means playing your note as good as you can. Acting inappropriately means being intentionally out of tune or refusing to play your note at all. Let's do some math. When we think abstractly, such as social media is a waste of time, it can be hard for that statement to hit our strings. But if we do some math and we put some numbers to this stuff, it becomes a bit more clear how important this is. Let's say you spend 2 hours a day on social media, which is a little bit less than what the average is, according to datareportal.com. I recently heard an estimate that it's upwards of 7 to 8 just on social media. But let's take 2 hours a day. And let's say that you're 30 years old. That's 2 hours a day, or 730 hours a year, or 34,000 and change hours in your remaining 47 years of life. That's 1,400 days, 204 weeks, or just under 4 years. When you're on your deathbed, are you going to be happy thinking about how much you wasted 4 years of your very short life on social media? Let's go through some more numbers. If you spend 30 minutes going to work every day and you get bothered by traffic, you get angry, you get pissed off, you give people the finger, well, that's an hour a day of driving. You are likely pissed off afterwards too, so it may be closer to 1.5 to 2 hours a day total of being upset. But let's just assume it's while you're driving. That's still 2 years of your life. If you're in traffic and you let that bother you every day, that's 2 years of your life you spend in anger. If you sleep in an extra hour a day, that's 2 years wasted. If you sleep in an extra 2 hours a day, that's 4 years wasted. How should we spend our time? I hope I got you a little scared now, because life is short. dear listener. And it doesn't feel like this day to day. That's the tragedy of this. Life doesn't feel short day to day. Life feels long. Days feel long. Years feel short. But it increasingly seems to go faster over the years and over the decades. So how should we spend our time? Isn't that the million-dollar question? Like Tolkien said, the character of Gandalf, all we have to decide is what to do with the time given to us. Let's set the foundation for a day not wasted. 8 hours a day to sleep. I don't care how important you think sending that 1 a.m. text to your latest Tinder match is. It's not nearly as important as putting that phone down and getting some rest. The reason this is so vital is that it sets your hormone rhythm and regulates your mood. It's very difficult to be in a good mood when your sleep is dysregulated, so make that an absolute priority. Get away from screens and bright lights at least an hour before bed. Stop eating and drinking a couple hours before bed, and you will sleep better. Go to bed at the same time every night, wake up at the same time every morning, within 30 to 60 minutes at the very least. So you take 8 hours. That's 1/3 of your time gone. But without that 1/3 investment, nothing else you do will be good. Next, surprise, surprise, make sure you get at least an hour of exercise a day. This means you're practicing physical fitness as well as mental fitness. 3 days a week, lift some weights. 3 days a week, do some light to moderate cardio, totaling 2 to 3 hours. That could be hiking outside, could be walking outside fast, briskly, as they say. And 1 day a week, get your heart rate up by doing something with high intensity. That's your 7 days a week. You don't have to overcomplicate fitness. 3 days a week to cardio, 3 days a week lift weights. Try and do some different things, get some variety in there. 1 day a week, do some intensity stuff. 4 minutes of intensity followed by 4 minutes of rest for 4 to 6 sets is a good rule of thumb for those intense workouts. Remember that, yes, training the body is vital for health and longevity, but it's also really important as part of training the mind. Remember, Seneca says, the body should be treated rigorously that it may not be disobedient to the mind. Let's assume that you have 2 hours a day dedicated to cooking, eating, cleaning, and any other daily life tasks, which I won't name. Perhaps your commute takes an hour. That leaves us with about 12 hours left. That's a lot of time. That's 12 hours a day that are not wasted just like that. Just if you get good sleep, you feed yourself, you do your cooking and cleaning, which is really important. That's 12 hours a day, not wasted. So what do we do with the remaining 12 hours? Everyone has different work schedules, but let's assume that you work 40 hours a week. That's 6 to 8 hours a day. You'll have some days completely off, hopefully. But what you'll notice is that work takes up at least half of the remaining time you have left. What I'm implying there is that you better damn well not hate your job. I could say that you should love your job, and you should. But if you simply don't hate it, that's a win. If you don't hate your job, that's a win. Remember, we work to pay our bills, to stay alive, to feed ourselves, and to contribute to the greater whole. All of that simultaneously. If you can get a job that aligns you with your nature, is beneficial to the world, your coworkers are good people, and it pays your bills, man, you are truly blessed. Get down on your knees right now and be grateful for that. If one of those things is missing, you don't like your coworkers, maybe the pay isn't what it should be. Well, you may have agency to switch jobs, and if you don't, you certainly have the agency to change your perspective on your job. But understand that your work is a huge part of your time. It's worth putting the focus into getting that equation right. And if you do, then all of a sudden 18 to 20 hours of your day are not wasted. Now, that assumes that you're actually working at work and not goofing around on social media. See what I mentioned earlier. But if you enjoy your work, you won't be doing that. So, man, if you get your sleep, get your exercise, have a job that you don't hate, man, that's a big portion of your time already that's not wasted. So what's left? 4 to 6 hours. What you do in the remaining 4 to 6 hours depends on your personal nature, who you have in your life, the context of your life, and so on. I can't decide what you do with your remaining hours. However, here are some things that are absolutely not a waste of time. Intentionally reading. This is vital for philosophy, of course, but perhaps it's reading the latest in medical research to become a better nurse. Journaling. I hope I don't have to explain the importance of this one. Volunteering. Can you help cook food at a shelter? Getting involved in your community. Can you coach the high school basketball team? Spending time with family and friends. Remember, all of your loved ones are mortal also. Don't take them for granted. Contemplation. We could call this meditation. These are more Stoic practices. Cooking bread for your neighbor. This is a personal one. I love cooking bread for my neighbors. Filling your own cup. Are you introverted and need the remaining 4 hours to be alone? Well, that's okay. You're allowed to take some time to fill your own cup. Playing or listening to music. Of course, it has to be good music, not just any music. It can't be music that's encouraging you to go break into a store and rob the place. But this is a spiritual practice that teaches you the harmony of Stoicism. Everyone loves music. You might be thinking, must I always be intentional? I understand that many look at this and think that perhaps it's a bit overkill. I mean, do we really need to be intentional with our time 24/7? And I would answer, absolutely. Remember how much an hour adds up over 40 years. Now, that does not mean that you can't factor in some time to do some unintentional things, but that must be done intentionally. You must set time aside intentionally for unintentionality. What does that look like in practice? Well, perhaps you give yourself an hour a day for leisure. Perhaps you limit your evening Netflix watching to an hour, but you give yourself an hour. Perhaps you overlap some tasks. When you do light cardio, you can also listen to podcasts, for example, or watch your favorite show. And let me be clear, don't beat yourself up for falling short of perfection. Time is short, remember, and beating yourself up is a massive time waster. I'll say it again. Life is short. We shouldn't get too caught up in planning out every moment of our day, but we should be intentional in how we spend our time so that we can live a full life. If you find yourself concerned about death, recall that Socrates went to death voluntarily. Why? Because he was intentional with his time throughout his life. As Seneca remarks, life is long enough if we know how to use it. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe with the notifications turned on. The Strong Stoic Podcast is also available in audio wherever you listen to your podcasts. Finally, you can join Substack to gain access to transcripts, articles, and premium podcast episodes.